Good evening. Welcome to Spiritual Warriorship. Always an opportunity to be thankful. We are discussing an attitude of gratitude from Spiritual Warrior 5. Making the mind your best friend. This is a wonderful chapter. I hope those of you who were here and heard some of the points last week, were more aware of your attitude of gratitude. I'm going to put in a plug, if you will. Today, I went to btswami.com. I said I wanted to listen to Bhakti Tirtha Swami while I was having my supper. And in the list of audio tapes, I saw an attitude of gratitude. And I said, oh my gosh, I got to listen to this, because that's what I want to talk about tonight. We're going on to that. And I spent the time listening. And then I got, it's a meditation in spirit in the Beggar 4. But what I want to encourage those of you there, when you have the chance to go to btswami.com, click on audio, and go down the list, and for the download for Attitude of Gratitude, he's reading his meditation that's in Beggar 4. And this was happening, and as he says in there, I may have only one more week to live. And he's talking about gratitude in such a wonderful way in the meditation. So I was thinking I might read it to you tonight, but I won't do that. I'd like you to hear it from himself. Okay? So that's the plug. Now, spiritual warriorship. And we're spiritual warriors. We're in training, in progress, in process. And we've been through quite a bit of material. I realized today that last year, I think it was November 13, was our first video. And we started with Spiritual Warrior 3, 12 Qualities of a Spiritual Warrior. And I must say, I'm thankful and grateful that the Lord has spared me and that I'm still able to present the works of writings of Bhakti Tirtha Swami, and my realization how he integrates the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada's teaching, and Srimad Bhagavatam to lead us to becoming spiritual beings. In fact, we have stated, and he has stated, that the concept of the spiritual warrior presentation is really to help us become grounded in knowing who we are as spiritual beings, spiritual warriors. And they're also to help us to be able to cope with whatever's going on, trying times in our lives, challenges in our lives. If you listen carefully and apply what you're hearing. And it's also presented so that we can use the spiritual warrior weapons we've been given to battle the consciousness and depression and anxiety that's out there. So those of you who have been following us, you've gotten a lot of wonderful material for the improvement of your life. So, and those who may just be joining us, there's always something coming from these readings to help you make change in your life, get a sense of who you are as a spiritual being and your relationship with the Supreme. And don't forget, if you don't as yet have the books, they can be purchased at Krishna.com store. And it's a series 6 spiritual warrior books plus other books he has. So let's return to where we left off. I want to do a quick run through before we start our new section tonight. How's that? The first mention of gratitude, gratefulness, he gives us from the Shastras, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, text 19, chapter 19, text 36. What grateful soul is there who would not render his loving service to such a great master as the personality of Godhead? The Lord can be easily pleased by spotless devotees who resort exclusively to him for protection, though the unrighteous man finds it difficult to procreate him. And we went through the first section was everything rests on the Lord. Everything rests on the Lord. If you're into your spiritual life or endeavoring to become more spiritual, that means that you have a sense of who you are as a spirit soul and that you have a relationship with the Lord. And it's through these kinds of readings in the Bhagavad Gita you begin to develop a closer relationship and understanding. So I just want to review a little of what we went through when he says we have a mindset of impoverishment and fear and do not appreciate that the Supreme Personality of Godhead either directly or indirectly arranges everything. And when we have that mindset, it detracts from our ability to progress and takes away our physical and mental sense of well-being. And I had my own experience with how mindful we must be and how attentive to our what our mindset is and how we hold on to these points that are truth for us and how fast you can forget them. Just this week, Monday, I think was the 5th, whenever. So the beginning of the month, took out my checkbook to pay. Thankfully, I don't have to mail off. Most stuff is done online or automatically withdrawn. And what had happened, I had ordered some supplements, and they were a little bit more than I had planned to spend, but I said I wanted them. So as I deducted the bill payments that were automatically out and this and that and down, and I saw my balance. And my first thing came to my mind, it's just the 5th of the month and that's your balance? How are you going to make it till it's a mind? You have to really master that mind. How are you going to make it till the end of the month? Will you make what you got to get bogus? And it was going on, and suddenly I said, no. I haven't gone into any loss or worry about how will I make it the month, because usually if I see that it's less than I expect, I just relax. So it was trying to get on me, and at some point I caught myself. And I'm saying, what kind of dialogue is this I'm carrying on? And I apologize, Lord, forgive me for this moment of forgetfulness. And I immediately said, I'm not worrying about checkbook balance. As of right now, all the bills are paid. I'm thankful for that, gratitude. And I had stopped and shopped, I think, Tuesday, and I had enough fruit and vegetables. I'm thankful for that. I'm not going to worry about the end of the month. So I'm sharing that to say one must be mindful and alert to what that mind can bring in and not develop a mindset of impoverishment and fear, because that can come up. And once you switch that consciousness, then you realize that everything does rest on the Lord. And He's your friend and protector, and He won't let you starve, if you will, or take the roof off your head. So He goes on to remind us that, and such an unhealthy mental state may even lead to failure and bring many negative situations into our lives. Once more, he quotes from Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord Himself says, before that He reminds us that an attitude of gratitude develops through the understanding that everything rests on the Lord. And that understanding comes by hearing, chanting, and experiencing, as I said before, being mindful of your everyday experience and situation. The Lord says, O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. And you know how beautiful a set of pearls are, one right next to the other. And He reminds us that if we really understand that all things rest on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we will then try to use every circumstance in our life for growth. We can look closer at every situation in order to discover the message or lesson that we can learn. Every situation, and there's always something happening in our lives. And it's not to go through those circumstances in a duh attitude, it's in a what's happening now? How can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? How can I help this person? It can help us find ways to serve better or learn more about other people, the environment, and ourselves. It can also help us appreciate the power and mercy of the Lord and understand the ways in which Maya influences us so that we can get around such obstacles. Gratitude is a valuable way to take care of our physical, mental, and spiritual states. So he gives us a few blocks. What blocks the development of gratitude? The first is the enemies of the mind. Remember, we went through that when we did Spiritual Warrior 4, the mind as your enemy. The enemies of the mind, such as fear, anxiety, anger, grief, depression, illusion, envy, and jealousy, will naturally hinder our ability to develop gratitude, because we will only focus on our own challenges and expectations. He goes on, some people may never express any gratitude in spite of your endeavor to serve or system. Many people these days never even say thank you. I had a lady I talked with about my age in she lives in Maryland, and we were talking, and apparently she and her son don't get along too well, haven't really seen each other too frequently. He calls once in a while. So she said recently he called and he came to visit, and while he was visiting he wanted to know why she didn't have a new couch or something, and she said she was fine. And something else he asked her about, and she said, well, I don't know, I've had those shoes for 2 years now, but I don't really need new shoes. So they went out, I think, for breakfast, and they had nice breakfast. And her grandson went to college last year. So when the visit ended, I think, and then he sent her an email or called her up and started talking to Mother, you really need to take care of yourself better and need to spend your money, and so you can enjoy it. But what she said to me, she felt there was an ulterior motive to their coming, him suddenly appearing and coming to see her. And she was, last year when the grandson went to college, she offered to pay the tuition. I think he goes to a state college, whatever, $2,000. Anyway, she said she offered to pay that. When she, at some time later, the grandson sent her a note, a card thanking her. She said to me that daughter-in-law, her son and her daughter-in-law, have not once said thank you for paying their son's tuition to school. But she felt this is another semester now, and here they are all of a sudden and worrying about her spending her money. So she had that, and I thought about that, and she said, when we sat for breakfast, she said, and she never said thank you. So that can really turn people off. And he states here that some people never say thank you. Sometimes they will not say thank you because they feel that they deserve whatever comes to them and expect even more to come. Other people do not express their gratitude because they simply are not aware of what you have done or what others have done for them. So look around you. Think the people you're seeing, you're talking to. Do you need to say thank you? Have you said thank you? Simple words, but it can really turn someone's life around.
There's a question.
Yes.
Brenda Lee asked, what is the difference between jealousy and envy?
Jealousy and envy. Envy is wanting what someone else has. Jealousy has to do with possession and not wanting anybody to, you thinking somebody's going to take something. Usually jealousy comes in a relationship thing, or somebody having more than you. But it's how much you think you focus on yourself and what you want that somebody has. So they could be about the same. I can't give you absolute definition. And I think if you think about it, you could probably give me a better answer. I like that. Of course, we can exchange. Oh, yes, we can if you want to put it there. Okay? But they're both enemies of the mind. And being the beings that we are, we know when we're being envious. We know when we're being jealous. And if we are mindful, are interested in a higher life or spiritual life, we will know that that's an enemy and want to transform that and make a different decision. And again, we can use this attitude of gratitude. If you're thankful for what you have in the present moment, you won't be envious of what anybody else has, because you'll realize everything is temporary. You'll understand that everything rests upon the Lord, and that He's taking care of what you need at the moment and not really what you want sometimes. And then you won't be jealous of anybody, because if there's somebody that's to be in your life, if everything rests on the Lord, He will take care of that, and you don't have to wish you had what who somebody else has. So it's all again about balancing your spiritual life and having an attitude of gratitude, being thankful for what you have, not what you think you want from somebody else. Another block as we're going through this is a lack of thankfulness. He reminds us that as spiritualists, we should always be in the spirit of thank you. As we interact with people, we should always think and say thank you. No matter what. Listen how he puts this. Thank you for helping me to see my own envious nature. Thank you for helping me look closer at my own selfishness. Because you know when these things are happening. Because you're not happy about it. There's a whole sense, difference in your attitude and your movement and your thinking. And when you become aware of that in life, you can say thank you because you then begin a process to change. Thank you for helping me look closer at my own ego. Thank you for helping me to look at my own selfishness. Thank you for helping me to understand how I can act as a better parent or a better person. Thank you for showing me the need to become a better disciple. Thank you for helping me to find ways to preach more effectively. Thank you for helping me to understand that every situation is an opportunity to serve and glorify the Lord.
There's another question
Okay.
by Brenda Lee. Do we use the mind to combat enemies of the mind, or is it spiritual?
We use the mind, we have to master the mind. By that, it means you have to let the mind know that you're not going to take any more of its nonsense, that you want to be more spiritual, you want to become spiritual, and spiritual means turning the negative into the positive. You can thank the mind sometimes for bringing up, I call it the nonsense, or bringing up the situation that makes you realize that you've been off track a little bit. And then you bring it back. So what we're working, these are concepts to make the mind your friend. We have said the mind can be your worst enemy or your best friend. If you allow those enemies to integrate in your life on a full-time basis and run wild without endeavoring to stop them and turn them around, we've done from Spiritual Warrior excessive anxiety, how to look at that and what changes that. We've done managing anger. I don't know if you're new, dear, or just coming. If there's some way you can get these Spiritual Warrior books. But when we study the qualities of a spiritual warrior, the first is sense control and mastery of the mind. And if we become aware of what the mind is bringing, we can stop it. Okay, stop right there. It listens. Because all the mind does is accept and reject. And you tell it, no, I'm not going in that direction anymore. That's why you need spiritual alternatives. You need alternatives to give it. Because if you're saying, stop, I don't want that, then you have to give it something else to accept. So that's why studying, being in spiritual association, reading sastra, scriptures, reading books and hearing from teachers and instructors who will help you have an attitude of gratitude or show you how best to manage your anger. So when you say to the mind, no more of that, I'm now going in this direction, and you stay with that, and it's spiritual, it has to accept it. Okay, I hope that helps. So we're saying blockage is a lack of thankfulness. And he's given us all the thank yous. We must be in a spirit of thank you all the time. When we do not genuinely say thank you in our lives, this ungrateful attitude will interfere with our spiritual growth. And that's why we're here in this material body, in this material world, is to grow spiritually, and as he mentioned so often, so that we can get back home, God to Godhead. Sometimes we simply must come to such a level of gratitude that we can just say, thank you, Lord, for allowing me to be sick and giving me this opportunity to read more. Ever thought of that? Thank you for this opportunity to be more introspective. Thank you for giving me this chance to appreciate health and use it more efficiently when I have it. Has it ever happened to you or to others? You get so busy. You're running and running and running day in and day out. You're not eating properly. You're not drinking enough water. You're not getting enough sleep. And everything else is so important. You're not really attending to your spiritual needs, but every other need. And suddenly, bad cold, a sprained ankle, and you can't run anymore. You have to be still to heal. Can you have that attitude of gratitude? Oh, thank you. This is now giving me a chance to think about you, Lord, or to read. I've had this spiritual book for 2 months and I've been wanting to read it. I can now read it. This is what he's saying to us, that we must say thank you in our lives and see that there's a reason for everything, because the Lord, everything rests on the Lord. When someone criticizes us, we can thank them for helping us look closer at ourselves. How about that? If someone criticizes you, do you want to punch them out? Or do you just say, okay, thank you, and you go and you take a look? Now, so this person said so and so and so and so. Have I done that? Did I do that? How did they get that energy from me? Self-examination. And sometimes they may be wrong. They maybe have low self-esteem, or maybe have envy of how you're doing and seem to be doing so well. And this is their reaction to it. But if you're a thankful person, you will first thank them. Oh, thank you for showing me that. And then look at yourself. This is what he's saying. So if someone criticizes you, you thank them for helping us look closer at ourselves. When someone praises us, and we all like praise, don't we? We can thank the Lord for showing us our big egos, and thank Him for seeing that it needs to be deflated. When we face dishonor, we can thank the Lord for keeping us humble and preventing us from relying entirely on our own abilities. And this takes me back to one of the qualities, humility. of a spiritual warrior. And being humble, you know who is the controller. You know who is the arranger. You know you're a servant of God. And in that way you can be humble. As my guru used to say, humble but brave. And this is like the point of everything rests on the Lord and having that understanding. We want to have gratitude towards the Lord, towards his representatives, and towards everyone in the environment. We can even feel grateful for those who have fallen into Maya and distinctly showing us what we want to avoid. Now, another block is excessive false ego. When we have too much false ego, we will definitely not appreciate the behavior of other people when they set good examples. Consequently, when they help us look closer at ourselves, we will simply try to hide or fall into a defensive mood. People who constantly feel sad, depressed, anxious, and disturbed will rarely have a genuine sense of gratitude, even in spiritual communities. Often people search for the faults like a rat that just connects with unhealthy or filthy situations. Due to some of these negative mindsets, some people only look for the negative. And I'm sure in our life, your life, you've met some people, ain't nothing right with anything. And when they find it, they hold on to it tenaciously. And then people begin to wonder why they feel so unfulfilled and unhappy around others. So I want to move on to what supports gratitude. We just looked at some of the blocks to having gratitude. We went through that. What he's saying is, what supports gratitude? The first is selflessness. Selflessness. In the higher spiritual realms, thinking solely of oneself is inimical to loving exchanges. Love never just revolves around the desires, needs, or experiences of the individual. Rather, the individual actually searches for some type of service to offer the beloved, and specifically wants to know the best way to render service, or the best way to offer that service. Not only will the person endeavor to nicely render service, but he or she will also look closely at the beloved to see if that type of service actually satisfies the person. If not, the individual is immediately ready to make a shift in order to do whatever pleases the beloved. However, some people do not love. They do not love themselves or others. Therefore, they have opportunistic reflections. In most cases, it simply turns into anger because they feel so disturbed that others interfere with their particular plan, their plan. In the material world, people form parties, clubs, groups, alliances, and even marriages with the idea that the other person or group of people will help them to fulfill their own desires. Consequently, people will simply remain miserable because love does not come out of selfishness. Rather, selfishness blocks love. I discussed this topic in detail in my book, Spiritual Warrior 2, Transforming Lust into Love. And we went through that. Remember the School of Love? Oh, I would keep feeling I'd like to go back. But at least I can go back and listen to them because they are in the archives online. As we genuinely honor the arrangements that God has already made, gratitude will naturally form an intricate part of that reflection. As we genuinely honor the arrangements that God has already made, gratitude will naturally form an intricate part of that reflection. Gratitude also involves the appreciation of what other people have already done for you. By maintaining such reflections, you will then live and imbibe so much happiness in life. Gratitude does not develop by carrying around so much anxiety from the past, which we then drag into the present and future. Actually, it involves learning from the past in spite of the difficulties and looking at the future in order to find ways to grow. And if you were with me when we went through setting goals, that makes it, he broke that down, how in order for your future to be at a higher level, you start in the present, but you set short-term goals, and then you plan how you will fulfill those goals. And if you're doing it on the spiritual level, they manifest for you because you really begin working on them step by step.
There's a question.
Question?
From Brenda Lee.
Who?
Brenda Lee.
Where is Brenda Lee? What location, when she gets a moment to let us know?
Okay.
If she doesn't mind. Yes, Brenda Lee.
She asked, what would the opposite of anger be?
What do you think the opposite, if you weren't angry, if one wasn't angry, how would they be?
She's from Long Beach, California.
Okay.
And Bhuvan Mohan asked peaceful. And then Brenda Lee says serious.
Serious? If they weren't angry, they'd be serious?
Yeah, serious or peaceful.
Okay. Okay. So you answered your question. Her question was, if you weren't angry, how would you be? And I asked her how, and she said peaceful?
She said serious.
Serious.
And Bhuvan Mohan said peaceful.
Okay. Are you satisfied with that, Brenda?
And Bhakti Carol says, anger is a result of our thwarted desire.
Our what?
Unfulfilled desire for ourselves.
Okay.
And Kremlin.
Oh, Kremlin's there.
adds that compassionate and serene
That's how
as
you...
an answer.
Oh, wonderful answer, yes. Compassionate and serene. Okay, you've been following us on how to manage anger. Okay, Brenda?
She says yes.
Okay. Thank you for being there and hearing. So he says we can constantly try to find ways to reflect on the Lord, praise Him and His devotees. When we think too much about ourselves, we will disturb others, or we will have emotional, psychological, and physiological problems that will make our spiritual acceleration more complex. Me, 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 me. It was the me generation, I think. I remember that phrase. I want, gimme, 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 gimme. But what happened? There was more confusion and frustration. By increasingly honoring life as it appears in many, many forms, and trying to see the Krishna or God factor in all situations, a devotee will advance much faster and will have a more genuine sense of spiritual maturity. See God in all situations, because His energy is everywhere. It's all God's energy. A symptom of advancement is that a devotee will not play into the duality as much. Another point that supports gratitude is recognizing the meaning of life. It's interesting, as I said, there was a song, I don't know what year it was. Why was I born? Why am I living? Any of you remember that? I don't know. Okay, anyway, it just shows what's buried down inside. But the meaning of life, recognizing. He tells us that there's a branch of psychotherapy called logotherapy, which does not play into the usual ways that people often look at problems related to the mind and body. It does not simply look at the personality as the ego versus the id or superego. Rather, it recognizes that humankind has a higher calling. It looks closer at whether or not people have meaning in their lives. It ultimately understands that life involves drawing out people's humanity so that they can give themselves more in service to the beloved. Logotherapy does not simply view life as a mechanical expression in which people try to accumulate or experience as much as possible. It seeks to find a sense of meaning, which of course is quite spiritual. This type of thinking has emerged from studies of cultural mindsets that led to devastating types of genocide and claimed many lives. Such periods of genocide occurred at various times in history, such as during the African slave trade, the annihilation of the Native Americans, and during the massive annihilation of the Jewish community. Dr. Viktor E. Frankl, a top psychiatrist who came up with this theory, was a prisoner in the Jewish concentration camps in Germany during World War II. He noticed that he could particularly determine the point at which certain people lost their desire to live. They would start passing stool and urine on themselves without changing and lose all desire to eat any food. The other prisoners would even know a few days ahead of time that such a person would soon die. He realized that all the people in that environment were experiencing the same types of torture and abuse. However, some people died fast, some people died slowly, and some people did not die at all. He paid particular attention to those in the environment who underwent the same devastating experiences as other inmates, but went on in spite of suffering. He noticed that the people who had a sense of meaning in their lives and a purpose to go on based on their mental framework lived longer, because the consciousness affected the actual body. The consciousness affected the actual body. Some people had a reason to live, but when they found their husband or children dead, they also soon lost their desire to live and died within a few days. Some people lived on because of their own intense belief in God. Other people completely gave up on the idea of God because they could not understand how God could create such an agonizing situation. Those people would die faster. Meaning is very important conception. And if we lack gratitude, it's harder to develop significant meaning in our lives. We will feel that we do not deserve some of the seemingly negative circumstances in our lives. Consequently, we will feel anger and disturbed. We will begin to wonder why God allowed such situations to unfold and why He singled us out instead of someone else. If we lack a healthy sense of meaning about life, that mentality will literally bring on physical death and even spiritual death, because a person cannot be a mature spiritualist or spiritual warrior and have weak faith. Another one of those qualities is firm faith, fixed in your faith. It does not mean that we should function on blind faith, but it means observing and honoring the Lord's intervention and arrangements. Observing and honoring. I was telling, I had an incident today, observing the Lord's arrangement and intervention. My health has been, I haven't been able to go to the temple fairly regularly, but for this month of Kartik, I made a decision I was going to go at least 3 mornings a week. And there was a mother who had said to me, I go 5 days a week, you just let me know. And I said, okay. So I went Monday, and I had 2 appointments on Tuesday, Wednesday. So I said to her, I wanted to go Thursday and Friday. But after going out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, my intelligence said, you need to rest on Thursday, but go Friday. So I called her up and I said, you can pick me up on Friday. I'm going to go to the temple. And another mother had called me from out of this area one day, and we had talked about meeting at the temple on Friday. Today, I got a call, and the mother who said she goes 5 days a week said to me she probably won't be able to take me tomorrow morning, Friday, because something with her car and her husband taking her brother to the airport. And she wanted me to know so that I could make other arrangements. And I thanked her for letting me go, and she apologized profusely for not being able to keep her word. What was happening? Well, I was talking to her. She'd call me on the cell phone. My land phone was ringing, but I didn't answer because I didn't want to interrupt. So we ended our conversation saying, I'll think about it and I'll try to find somebody else. And she said, I'll see if I can find somebody else. And I just sort of relaxed in my mind. Okay, Lord, I want to go. Who am I to call? Because after a while, if you understand that everything rests on the Lord, as we said earlier, I'm getting closer to that, you just kind of turn to him and say, okay, what you got? But what happened, I picked up the phone to call back the person who had called me that I didn't answer. It was the mother who lived in Jacksonville, about 2 hours from Alachua, where I am. And she said, how are you? I said, I'm okay. I'm sorry I didn't answer. I was on the phone because the mother who was going to take me to the temple Friday morning called to let me know she couldn't, so I have to find somebody else. She says to me, what time do you go? I said, usually I'm ready at 7 to go. She says, well, I'm coming in and I'll pick you up. I'll be there about 10 to 7. I thanked her very much. But when I hung up, an attitude of gratitude. So he's saying to us, it does not mean that we should function on blind faith, but it means observing and honoring the Lord's intervention and arrangements. Faith means that we see and act through the eyes of the Scripture and see and act through the lives of great saints. Many scriptures describe the biography of these great saints, and we can use such description to make proper evaluations instead of solely relying on our own intelligence and mind. But that was quite an experience today, and I guess I'm maturing, I'm growing, because at another time I would have been, oh my God, what do I do? How will I get there? Who do I call? I don't know who else to call, this one, that one. But I realized I was quite calm when I hung up, and it was like, something will happen, I'll get there. So that's very encouraging, and of course, I said thank you. An attitude of gratitude.
There's a question.
There's a question?
Mm-hmm. From Lightning, I think.
Who?
Lightning 2245.
What's that, a code?
I think it's Nitai, I think. But his question is there a very clear and substantial distinction between one's willingness to accept a material death as opposed to a spiritual death?
What's the difference? What's a material death and a spiritual death? You define for me, because I'm not quite clear. Material death and a spiritual death. Read the question again while the answer's coming.
Is there a very clear and substantial distinction between one's willingness to accept a material death as opposed to a spiritual death?
Is he answering what? Because, I don't know how to answer that because I'm not quite clear what you mean, a material death and a spiritual death. Spiritual means you're an eternal spiritual being. You never die. That soul never dies, if that's what you're talking about. Material death is this material temporary body. It's what dies. Now, I don't know if that's what you're saying, asking. Because I think you say, is there a clear
distinction?
It's like Krishna saying to Arjuna, you don't know the difference between the material and the spiritual. The material is temporary. Whatever it is going to die, break down, deteriorate, including the body that you're in and the body that I am in. But Krishna is also reminding Arjuna, chapter 2, Bhagavad Gita, that what you really are, who you really are, is eternal. Throughout these spiritual warrior books, Bhakti Tirtha Swami is reminding us that we are eternal spiritual beings, that eternal never dies. So, unless you have another, that's my understanding of material death, spiritual death. Spiritual, there is no death. Spiritual is eternal. Spiritual is advancing and getting closer to the Lord. It's living. Spiritual is living. Living in this faith that we just spoke about. Living selflessly. Living in love and devotion to the Supreme Lord. So unless you have a clear definition of what you mean by spiritual death and material death, that's my response.
He wrote, for example, one's willingness to move on and leave their material body is one thing.
One's willingness to
move on and leave their material body is one thing. And then the next thing he writes is, isn't it possible that one may be willing to leave the body even though they have not given up on their connection to God? And then Bhakti Carol asks, suicide? Do you want to see it?
Do I want to see it? No, I don't want to see it. It sounds...
he said, no, not suicide. I'm referring to what was described in the Nazi concentration camps.
Okay, what did you hear that I read from the Nazi concentration? Because what he's saying, there has to be meaning in your life for the people that stayed alive. He paid particular attention to those in the environment who underwent some devastating experiences as other inmates, but went on in spite of the suffering. He noticed that people who had a sense of meaning in their lives and a purpose to go on based on their mental framework lived longer because the consciousness affected the actual body. So what was that? What is the willingness? I'm not sure what he... read it again. No.
The other comment, he says that the persons who were willing to let go and move on were not necessarily less connected to God.
The people who were willing to let go of what?
Their body and move on were not necessarily less connected to God.
Okay, who's saying that they were? I'm not clear. Who is this?
Lightning 2245.
Lightning 2245. Okay. willingness to let go their bodies. If we're talking the concentration camp, it was willing or not, they died. But what Frankel is saying, if you have some meaning in life, you didn't die as fast, and he, for one, survived and got out. So the willingness, what will do we have with this material body? It's going to die anyway. So again, I'm not quite sure how you mean that. What else does he say? Read that again, because maybe one of you on the chat line. What time is it? Maybe one of you might understand it. Read the last thing. What does he say?
That the persons who were willing to let go and move on were not necessarily less connected to God.
Were not necessarily less connected to God? If they were willing to move on without fear, they had a connection, some meaning in their life. And we can't determine if that's connected to God or not. Something was important, meaningful in their lives. And what Bhakti Tirtha Swami is saying, because I went to this therapy page, and it doesn't necessarily deal with God, it just deals with meaning. But there's something he said here. It seeks to find a sense of meaning, which of course is quite spiritual. Because there has to be some reason that you want to live. And then also for me, a reason to be ready to die. And for me, that meaning is a connection with God. And what will happen when I die, and the spirit will go back to God. Now that's where I am. And as I say, I wish you could define a little bit. Find anybody else in the chat room understand that particular question, or feel they have an answer for that I may not have expressed? Or what's his lightning 2000?
2245, 2245.
Are you getting some feedback from me that's helpful? Or are you still asking a question? Are you still there? Because somehow I feel to ask, what is it you really want to ask? What is it you really want to understand? That everything rests on the Lord as we started, or what? What is it?
You can summarize what you've been reading, and that might clarify things.
Okay, is there a response to that? You're not in? All right, listen, my dears. That's wonderful exchange. I like it. So what we've done tonight is endeavor to look at what supports gratitude. Remember, we started out with what blocks gratitude. And that was what? The enemies of the mind. A lack of thankfulness and excessive false ego. That blocks us having gratitude. But what supports gratitude, we looked at, was selflessness. Being able to love others and care for others. And recognizing the meaning of life. And that meaning of life has to reach a point of having faith. And observing and honoring the Lord. Intervention and arrangement, because as we said at the very beginning, everything rests on the Lord. So it's about almost, I feel like saying, the basic of knowing who you are. That's the first one of the concepts of the spiritual warrior presentation. Knowing who you really are as a spiritual being. As knowing that or understanding that or developing that, you know that you have a connection to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his part and parcel and as his servant. As you understand that, you begin, as he said earlier, to understand that everything rests, and you begin to see the intervention and arrangements of that Supreme Lord in your life. I think Prabhupada states in it's a Krishna consciousness, God consciousness, God realization is a gradual process. But if we as spiritual warriors can realize that we're really at war and we're on a mission, but our mission is that we want to connect with God more than anything else in our lives. So I hope that's helpful. I hope it's given you something to think about and work on your attitude of gratitude during the week. And we will meet again next week, same time, same place, and we will begin with remove yourself from the center. That's something to think about. And hopefully we'll get to also the importance of forgiveness. All right? Any more questions, comments?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Lightning 2245 says, I might have misheard, but I thought that I had heard that the observation was that many of the persons who were willing to let go and die had somehow lost faith in God. And then he says, my thought is that one can see this in the reverse in some instances. If one has completely detached themselves from this material world, then one might be more willing to embrace death when faced with it, as opposed to fighting it. And then he says, thanks for the wonderful class.
All right. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for being here and participating. And do continue. I didn't ask you your location. I'm just curious where folks are coming from, watching this from. If you care to tell us, I'd appreciate it, and try not to let my ego get in the way that, I heard from somebody across the seas or down the block. But I thank you all for being here this evening. Please imbibe this concept of an attitude of gratitude. Be thankful this week and see how each situation you're thankful for is to help you in your spiritual growth. And Brenda, thank you for coming from California, and I hope you'll be back another time. And Carol, I heard your name, you're there. And Bhuvan Mahan, I'm glad you're there. And whoever else, Kremlin, you said is there.
Kremlin, yeah. And William.
William?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you all. Please imbibe this, practice it, and come back next week. Thank you. Hare Krishna.